At Arkan Academy, Ian Precus is just another third-year student in the swordsmanship department. His friend Celine Haster is in the second-year knights department, and another friend, Leto Einstern, is also a third year in swordsmanship. Like any normal students, their biggest worries are grades, exams, and daily academy life. To shake off the stress, Ian and Leto sometimes sneak in a little drink. After one such night of fun, Ian stumbles back to his room and falls asleep. That night, he has a strange dream. He is standing on a battlefield, surrounded by fallen enemies. In the middle of it all, he sees a figure that looks just like him. The figure warns him, Delpharem is coming, stop him. When Ian wakes up, the name Delpharem lingers in his mind. It sounds familiar, like something from an old legend, but he brushes it off as just a drunken dream. Then, he notices something odd, a letter sitting on his desk that wasn't there before. Stranger still, the date on his calendar has jumped ahead by 7 days. Confused, he picks up the letter and starts reading. The handwriting is elegant, clearly from a woman. Before even finishing, Ian imagines it might be from a secret admirer, but as he reads on, his excitement fades. The letter claims to be from someone named Sophia, written in the year 571 of the imperial calendar, on the 15th day of the month of the bow, but those dates don't match any modern records. The final words sent a chill down his spine. If we don't protect the future, the world will perish. Annoyed, Ian crumples the letter and throws it away, assuming it's some kind of prank. But as he walks through the academy halls, something feels off. Students whisper behind his back. They keep their distance, looking at him like he's diseased. That's when he notices something even stranger. He's carrying an axe. Spotting his friends Leto and Selene, Ian calls out to them, but instead of greeting him, they freeze and turn away. When he tries to get their attention, Leto stares at him, eyes wide with shock. "Something about you was different yesterday," Leto murmurs. Ian, completely lost, demands an explanation. Finally, Selene speaks up. "You've been possessed for an entire week." Ian feels his stomach drop. As far as he remembers, he just said goodbye to them last night. How could 7 days have passed? Selene and Leto look frustrated. Apparently, while possessed, Ian treated them like servants and ruined his reputation. If that wasn't bad enough, they had even considered calling an exorcist, until he threatened them with the axe he's still holding. Ian grips the weapon tightly, more confused than ever. His friends flinch as if they've seen him do something terrifying with it before. The weight of everything hits him at once. How was he possessed? He wasn't near any cursed objects or dangerous places. Then, a thought creeps into his mind. Could it be connected to that battlefield dream? One thing is clear. Whatever took control of him is gone now, and before he can figure out what really happened, he'll have to deal with the mess his possessed self left behind. After hearing the news, Ian is left wondering what terrible thing he could have done. The answer is clear. His actions were beyond reckless. In fact, they were so shocking that he might not even be ready to accept them. Somehow, he had managed to defeat the strongest student of the second years. The reality sinks in. Ian had bested Saria Jordana, the youngest aura expert and the feared monster swordswoman of the academy. The thought alone is difficult to believe. The memory of the battle remains blurry, making it even harder for him to comprehend how he achieved such a feat. As if simply winning wasn't enough, Selene explains that the way he defeated her was so brutal that she was left hospitalized for an entire week. The more he thinks about it, the more he questions what kind of force took over his body to make such a thing possible. No one has an answer. However, dwelling on the past is pointless now. What matters is the present. There is something far more concerning ahead, his swordsmanship class. Today, he has to face Saria once again. The memory of their last fight resurfaces. In that moment, Saria had struggled desperately against him, unable to keep up. His piercing glare alone was enough to make her falter. When he struck, it sent her flying backward. Blow after blow landed without mercy, shocking the watching students. For as long as they could remember, Saria had never lost a battle. Even fourth-year students found her difficult to defeat, yet Ian, without any effort, had torn through her defenses as if she were nothing. The possessed version of Ian had stood over her, his presence overwhelming. It was almost laughable to him how easily she fell into his traps. He had purposely left openings, expecting her to be cautious, yet she charged straight into them without hesitation. She didn't even question the obvious bait he had set. Back in the present, the weight of the upcoming rematch hangs over Ian like a dark cloud. Of all people, why does he have to face her again? If it were anyone else, he might have stood a chance, but Saria Jordana is not just anyone. She is the Academy's strongest fighter. The thought of stepping into the ring with her again is enough to make him want to walk away. Celine even suggests that giving up now might be his best option. Meanwhile, the students rally behind Saria, urging her to reclaim her pride. Her loss had been humiliating, and she is determined not to let it happen again. Normally, the instructors favor her, allowing her to maintain her status without much challenge. However, this time, all eyes are on her, and the pressure is suffocating. She cannot afford to lose again. Before the match begins, the professor issues a final reminder. This battle will count toward their grades. Ian immediately regrets everything. Losing was already inevitable, but now, failing could have even worse consequences. Unlike Saria, whose reputation could withstand a small setback, he cannot afford to fail. The idea of being forced to return home, jobless and aimless, is terrifying. The match begins, and Saria wastes no time. She strikes with incredible speed, landing a single hit that sends Ian flying. He crashes to the ground with a painful thud. One attack is all it takes for him to realize the truth. He is completely outmatched. Even if he tries to hold his ground, the outcome is obvious. A trip to the hospital is inevitable. Yet, surrendering would only make things worse. Saria would never accept a victory without a real fight. She would demand another match, refusing to let him escape so easily. Forcing himself to stand, Ian pushes forward. As he leaps into the air to strike, he notices something strange. His body feels lighter, his movements more refined. There is a precision he has never experienced before. The question lingers in his mind. What exactly happened to him when he was possessed? As the battle rages on, Saria spots an opening in Ian's defense and swiftly knocks his sword out of his hands before he can strike. For a brief moment, Ian had believed he might actually have a chance after sensing the strange boost in his strength. But reality proves otherwise. It was nothing more than wishful thinking. Meanwhile, Saria wonders if that weak point in his defense was deliberate. Last week, he had effortlessly tossed her aside as if she was a mere practice dummy. During their last encounter, Ian had left openings on purpose, almost as if he were playing with her. The thought alone frustrates Saria. She had become the subject of ridicule because of him, and now he's acting as if their battle is insignificant. Fueled by irritation, she launches another powerful strike. This time, Ian is ready. He quickly blocks the attack, noticing how much sharper his reflexes have become. His reaction speed and kinetic vision are far better than before. At this rate, it wouldn't be unreasonable to believe he can keep up with her in this match. The battle intensifies as Ian gradually adapts to her attacks, meeting her strikes head-on. However, her relentless assault is beginning to wear him down. Saria, on the other hand, keeps recalling what Ian had told her last week. Never rush in just because an opening appears. Assume it's a trap. That very lesson is why she demanded this duel in the first place. But now, watching Ian's performance, she starts to feel like he isn't even taking this fight seriously. Determined to prove herself, she charges in again, unwilling to stop until Ian fights her with everything he has. Realizing there's no avoiding it, Ian finally decides to stop holding back. His power has clearly increased, and now he's confident he can defeat her. However, Saria's movements are strangely exaggerated. It's clear that possessed Ian's words have gotten to her. She's overthinking every move, hesitating when she normally wouldn't. Their fight continues until Ian decides he's had enough. To him, he's proven his strength and sees no reason to continue. But Saria is far from satisfied. The glimpse of power Ian has shown only fuels her determination even more. Now that he's serious, she wants to push herself to match him. Without hesitation, she leaps into the air and crashes down with a devastating strike, landing a direct hit. Ian collapses onto the ground as the teacher begins the countdown. If he fails to stand before it finishes, he will lose. But Saria is furious. She realizes he let that attack land on purpose just to end the fight. She refuses to accept such an outcome. If Ian dares to walk away like this, she will challenge him again. If he skips class, she'll keep pursuing him. This won't end until he experiences the same humiliation she did. Meanwhile, Ian is just annoyed by the whole situation. He doesn't even remember what he did to her last week, yet she treats him like some lifelong rival. It all seems ridiculous. However, he manages to get up before the countdown reaches 0. The teacher offers him a chance to withdraw, but Ian refuses. The fight must continue. Saria is pleased. This is the right choice. It wouldn't feel right to leave things unresolved. Ian, however, smirks, feeling a sudden surge of excitement. If this is what she wants, then he'll make sure to break that stubborn pride of hers, just like last time. As soon as the battle resumes, Saria makes the first move, but Ian counters with unexpected ease. Before she can react, he catches her sword with his bare hands and tosses it aside. Raising his own weapon, he prepares to end the fight. But then, something makes him hesitate. Saria is trembling, her guard completely down. In that moment, Ian realizes that no matter how many times he defeats her, nothing will change. This isn't about victory. It's about understanding why they're even fighting. Instead of striking, he simply flicks her forehead, ending the match in the most unexpected way possible. Saria misinterprets Ian's actions, thinking he is trying to mock her after his victory. Meanwhile, Ian wonders why she is so desperate to win. For her, winning is everything. Losing means becoming a joke in front of everyone. But Ian tries to make her see things differently. What others think doesn't define her skills. One loss won't erase the effort she's put into her training. People's opinions change quickly, but the strength she's gained through hard work remains. He understands how painful it is to be ridiculed after defeat. He has lived with the weight of failure for a long time, so he knows that dwelling on others' judgment is pointless. A single loss doesn't change a person's worth. Even if people laugh at her now, nothing truly changes. Saria reflects on his words. She had doubted her own abilities after losing to him before, believing that her swordsmanship was meaningless. But this battle has given her a new perspective. She realizes that there is more to strength than just winning. For the first time, she feels grateful to Ian. The crowd is stunned. They never expected Saria to admit defeat, especially to someone like Ian. This marks his second victory against one of the Academy's top students. The teacher officially announces him as the winner. Despite losing, Saria feels inspired. Ian's words have given her the motivation to carve her own path without worrying about others' opinions. She no longer wants to be trapped by the expectations of those around her. A few days later, Ian once again finds himself the center of attention. The Academy is buzzing with whispers about him. Students now see him as a monster. Not only did he defeat Saria, but he also made her surrender. Ian, however, doesn't feel like he truly earned this victory. He believes she wasn't fighting at her full strength. While it's true that his aura detection and mana have improved significantly over the past week, he still doesn't understand what caused this sudden change. There's a gap in his memory, and he wants to know what happened. His friends gather around him, concerned about his well-being. He reassures them that he's fine, but he can't shake the unease about what happened to him. They remind him that the saintess at the cathedral confirmed he was all right. But Ian isn't convinced. With all the strange rumors spreading, he can't help but feel uneasy. Celine, however, doesn't think he should waste time worrying about the gossip. In fact, the rumors aren't even bad. Before all this, people looked down on him as a weak noble. But that's no longer the case. She was always annoyed when others dismissed him as insignificant. Now, thanks to his unexpected rise, even the high-ranking nobles have stopped looking down on them. Some are even afraid that Ian might crush them next. Celine then brings up another rumor. Apparently, Syria has been following Ian around ever since their battle. Ian glances to the side and immediately spots her. She is lurking behind a tree, dressed in a disguise so obvious that it barely qualifies as one. Celine is completely thrown off by how ridiculous it looks. Syria stands there with full confidence, as if she actually believes she's blending in. Ian can't help but wonder, why is she following him after getting defeated twice? For nearly 5 days, Syria has been lurking around Ian, and he isn't sure how to handle the situation. His friends notice her persistence and suggest that he talk to her, as she seems desperate to speak with him. Eventually, Ian decides to confront her. He acknowledges that he's aware of her following him and asks if there's something she wants to say. Syria, looking unusually reserved and nervous, is startled that Ian saw through her disguise so easily. Despite her embarrassment, she quickly gathers herself and asks for his guidance in becoming stronger. Ian immediately notices a shift in her attitude. She has been far more polite since their last duel. However, he doesn't understand what he could possibly teach someone who is already stronger than him. If she's looking for moral lessons, that's a different matter, but when it comes to actual skill, he doesn't believe he has anything valuable to offer. Besides, he is relieved to have his normal routine back and doesn't want to get involved in her training. In the end, he turns her down, though he reminds her that she is already powerful enough. His victories against her were not due to superior skill, but because she let her guard down. If anything, luck played a huge role in his wins. However, Syria believes that luck is just another form of skill. She insists once more, saying she doesn't need long-term guidance, just enough help until the upcoming hunting festival. The mention of the festival catches Ian off guard, as it reminds him of a strange letter he received, which also mentioned the event. That year, the festival was marred by several incidents. One particularly gruesome case involved Emma from the alchemy department, who was gathering medicinal herbs when she was attacked by a mysterious creature. She was later found with severe injuries, her stomach torn open. Realizing the importance of this connection, Ian shifts his focus to the bigger issue. Before leaving, he advises Syria to seek guidance from Professor Derek if she truly wants to improve. Without explaining, Ian abruptly rushes off. His friends, confused by his sudden departure, ask where he is going. He vaguely responds that he just remembered something urgent. Although he doesn't fully trust the contents of the letter, the fact that his friends' names were mentioned in it unsettles him. Later, he tracks down Emma in the alchemy lab. He is certain she holds some answers regarding his situation. A few days pass, and Syria begins training under Professor Derek's guidance. He observes her progress and praises the fluidity of her movements. If she continues at this pace, she will be able to refine her aura by the time of the hunting festival. He is also surprised that she reached out for help, as it's something he rarely sees from her. Syria eagerly shares that it was Ian who suggested she train under him, and she has no regrets about following his advice. However, she soon concludes that she has learned everything Derek has to offer and decides to leave. Her bluntness catches the professor off guard, and he can't help but notice her complete lack of social awareness. Before she leaves, Derek reassures her that she doesn't need to rush. He is confident that she will outperform most of the competition with ease. As a first-time participant in the hunting festival, he also gives her a valuable tip, familiarizing herself with the terrain and creatures of the southern forest, where the event will take place. Her upperclassmen have likely already begun preparing. Curious, she asks whether stronger monsters exist in the southern forest. Derek confirms that the entrance is relatively safe, but as she moves deeper in, the creatures become significantly more powerful. Hearing this, Syria decides she will explore further next time. However, Derek warns her not to go too deep alone. While most students can handle the usual monsters, records show that far more dangerous creatures tend to appear as the hunting festival approaches. From there, the story shifts to the origins of the gods. At the dawn of creation, two powerful beings emerged. The heavenly god, Ars, was born alongside light, while darkness brought forth the evil god, Omelos. Together, Ours and the flow of time shaped the universe, establishing an unbreakable rule. Time must always move forward. If this law were ever broken, chaos would consume the world. To prevent this, ours placed strict limits on time, ensuring its order remained intact. Only a being of immense power could ever challenge this rule, someone like Dilam, an enemy of the heavenly god. Meanwhile, Emma struggles to explain this ancient law to Ian, who barely understands a word of it. She's frustrated, especially since he was the one who disturbed her after she pulled an all-nighter, demanding an explanation. Even worse, after not seeing her for a month, he barged in without warning. She feels like he only comes to her when he needs something, while he insists that they are friends. Regardless, he apologizes and asks her to simplify the story. Emma relents and summarizes the key point. Defying time requires overwhelming strength, and only one being has that kind of power: Dilam, the servant of the evil god. Ian immediately connects this to a mysterious letter he received, suspecting it might have come from Dilam. Emma isn't convinced. The existence of Dilam is uncertain, let alone the idea that such a being could send a letter. Ian then wonders if Omelos himself could be involved, but since there's no proof, Emma dismisses the idea. She advises him to keep the letter a secret to avoid being ridiculed. As Ian prepares to leave, Emma hands him 2 potions she recently invented. They are presence-suppressing drugs, and she encourages him to test them. Excited by the idea, Ian imagines turning completely invisible, only for Emma to clarify that the potion won't make him disappear, it simply hides his presence. Eager to try it, Ian drinks one, only to gag at the horrible taste. Emma scolds him for wasting such a valuable item without thinking. Despite the awful taste, Ian tests the potion's effect. He asks Emma to close her eyes and try to sense him while he hides. To his surprise, he can't even feel his own presence, as if he has become a ghost. Thinking he now has the perfect advantage for the upcoming hunting festival, he feels confident until Emma immediately pinpoints his location. His excitement vanishes when she explains that, while the potion worked, his body odor gave him away. It hadn't occurred to her during testing that scent could betray someone's presence. Ian then decides to leave, promising to test the second potion in the forest and report back. Before he goes, he warns Emma to avoid the forest until after the hunting festival, as the monsters there have been acting strangely. Seeing an opportunity, Emma takes advantage of Ian's willingness and invites him to accompany her whenever she needs materials. He agrees without hesitation. Later that night, Ian returns to his dormitory, still troubled by the ominous letters predicting Emma's death. He wants to warn her properly and hopes she takes his concerns seriously. Suddenly, Leto bursts into the room, furious that Ian abandoned their friends without any explanation. Ian immediately suspects Leto of planting the strange letters as a prank and demands answers. However, Leto is confused and has no idea what Ian is talking about. The topic shifts, and Leto asks about Emma's well-being. Ian reassures him that she's fine. Emma was found at the edge of the forest, severely wounded. The scouts believed a monster had attacked her, an unusual event in that area. It seemed she had let her guard down, but drinking a special potion that made her appear dead had saved her life. Still, Ian was convinced that the Saintess's divine power was what truly kept Emma alive. However, the Saintess admitted that her abilities had limits. A miracle could be performed, but it required a rare offering. It was not about money, but the difficulty of obtaining it. Unfortunately, she warned them to prepare for the worst. Emma's father was already on his way, desperate to see his daughter. The Saintess offered to explain the situation to him, allowing Ian to return to the academy, but Ian refused. He had been the last person to see Emma before the attack, and he felt responsible for telling her father the truth. The weight of guilt was heavy on Ian, but the Saintess reassured him that he was not to blame. Meanwhile, outside the infirmary, Leto was furious. Monsters did not usually appear near the forest's entrance, and if this had not happened, Emma would be fine. Before they could dwell on it further, Emma's father arrived. His face was streaked with tears, and his appearance was unkempt, as if he had rushed there without care. Seeing Ian, he pleaded to see his daughter, but even he was not allowed inside for safety reasons. Ian and Leto could only promise him that the priests were doing all they could. Ian took out the potion bottle Emma had given him, offering it to her father. It felt right for him to have it, but the man refused, asking only one thing: to save his daughter. The simplicity of the request crushed Ian with guilt. He had ignored the warning in the letter, but if he had taken it seriously, maybe this could have been prevented. He no longer knew if the letter was truly from the future, but he could no longer brush it aside. Determined, he decided to track down Sepia, the person who had sent it, and ensure that its grim predictions never became reality. The next day, Ian embarrassed himself by asking Leto about a girl named Sepia. Instead of answering, Leto burst into laughter, teasing him about having a secret admirer. The idea that someone would be interested in Ian was too ridiculous for him. Ian, unfazed, insisted he just needed to ask her some questions, but Leto continued to joke until Ian finally shut him up with a well-placed punch. Once the teasing stopped, Leto pointed out that Sepia was also the name of a flower. Since flower names were common in the north, the sender might be from that region. This reminded Ian of the Yordina family, and Leto agreed, mentioning that he had a person in mind: Syria Yordina, a girl who happened to be a fan of Ian. Before Ian could process this, Syria suddenly appeared, handing him a pouch of gold. She called it payment for teaching her, though Ian had no idea what she was talking about. She reminded him that she had once asked for his guidance and later realized it was rude not to offer something in return. Ian insisted it was unnecessary and refused such a large reward. Still, he was curious. Why was she so desperate to train with him? Syria explained that she wanted to learn from the one person she had never been able to defeat. But Ian doubted he had anything to teach someone as skilled as her. She had the potential to improve on her own. Syria acknowledged this, but didn't want to miss the upcoming hunting festival, as it was her last chance to participate. Hearing this, Ian suddenly remembered something important. The letter had mentioned that Sepia was also a participant in this year's hunting festival. If Syria was Sepia, this event would confirm it. With that in mind, Ian finally agreed to train with her. He still hadn't figured out if she was truly Sepia, but he had learned one thing. Sepia had no social skills. She was known as Rude Yordina, though it wasn't because she was intentionally mean. She simply didn't know how to interact with others. Syria had no understanding of rest. Ian had heard that high-ranking nobles trained without stopping, relying on healing potions to recover, and she was no exception. Even when Ian suffered a painful bruise, she insisted they continue, believing a single potion would fix everything. However, Ian knew that while potions could heal wounds, they didn't relieve muscle fatigue or tension. This was why people took breaks during training. Curious about her determination, Ian wondered why she was pushing herself so hard. Syria finally admitted that there was someone in their 4th year she desperately wanted to defeat before they graduated. If she missed this chance, she would likely never get another. Ian figured she could always challenge them later, but Syria knew it wasn't that simple. In her family, anyone who dared to challenge the head was immediately cast out. The 4th-year student she wanted to defeat was none other than her half-sister, Delphine Yordina, the future head of their family. This meant the academy was the only place where she, a member of a lesser bloodline, could fight Delphine on equal terms. Once her sister graduated, that opportunity would be lost forever. The memory of her defeat was still fresh. Delphine had changed the rules, twisting them to secure her victory. Even though Syria had fought alone without any allies, her sister had looked down on her, unfazed. Delphine had the full support of the Yordina family, while Syria stood alone, and that had ultimately led to her loss. As Ian listened, his quiet understanding made Syria wonder if she had finally found someone willing to stand by her side. For the first time, she considered the idea of asking him for help. Time moved forward, bringing the highly anticipated hunting festival, a grand event cherished by Emperor Aedelus. It was one of the most prestigious competitions in the academy, meant to determine the best hunter, the one capable of taking down the strongest magical beasts. These creatures roamed freely in the southern forest, specifically kept there for this challenge. The festival held another layer of mystery for Ian. According to the letters, Sepia, the unknown messenger, was supposed to participate. Additionally, Syria was somehow tied to him, with their connection meant to deepen during the event. He still didn't understand why he was at the center of all this, but the thought left him restless. Just as he was lost in thought, Celine rushed up to him, insisting they go together. Without warning, she called him an idiot, convinced he wouldn't want to team up with Syria after their earlier conflict. Even when Ian assured her they had reconciled, she still found it odd that Syria had been following him for the past few days. Ian dismissed it as mere curiosity, especially since Syria had since stopped. Celine, however, found the whole thing frustrating. She couldn't understand why Ian was going out of his way for Syria. Annoyed by her complaints, Ian suddenly grabbed her face, squeezing her cheeks like a chef handling dough. She was left speechless, completely caught off guard. Before she could react, Ian casually asked if she had changed her perfume. Flustered, she admitted it was just the scent of her facial cleanser. Of course, Ian didn't actually care. He had only asked to change the subject. Classic distraction tactics. Selene was curious about what kind of exercises they would be doing. Ian figured it would mostly involve exploring the forest, and he was hoping they wouldn't run into any magical beasts. Normally, that would be the case, but according to the letter, an attack was bound to happen. If he reacted the right way, he could prevent a disaster. That meant if he failed, people could die. He was determined not to let that happen. As the only one aware of the warning, it was up to him to change the outcome. Before the event started, the instructor gathered the students for an important announcement. He informed them that Emma had been injured in the forest and was now in the hospital. It was strange, since magical beasts had never been seen so close to the entrance before. He warned them to stay alert. There was more bad news. Since most of them were melee fighters, fighting in a dense forest would be a challenge. Trees would make it harder to swing their swords properly, while the monsters they faced would have the advantage of being in their natural habitat. Ian knew this would put them at a serious disadvantage. However, the instructor reassured them that any swordsman skilled enough to manifest their aura could cut through anything, even in difficult terrain. To prove his point, he demonstrated how a strong blade could clear the forest effortlessly. That didn't mean they could just slash recklessly, though. The environment would play a key role in battle, and maintaining the right distance was crucial. For their first exercise, the students were paired up and told to explore freely. The instructor warned them not to go too deep into the forest. If they felt threatened, they should retreat immediately. But Ian knew what was coming. A large group of magical beasts would ambush them, and the best way to survive would be to stick together. The problem was that the event was designed for pairs, making it impossible to convince everyone to stay in a large group. No one would believe him anyway. His best option was to warn the professor as soon as the monsters appeared. But there was a chance he'd be caught in the battle himself. With that in mind, he ignored Celine's invitation and rushed past her, asking Syria to team up instead. Selene was left frozen in shock, completely crushed by his decision. The exploration began, and for now, Ian and Syria stayed within the safe zone. No magical beasts had appeared yet, which felt strange. Even Syria, who had a better sense for these things, found it unusual. Ian suggested they take a break, but reminded her to stay alert. As the sun began to set, she stood in front of him, looking hesitant, as if she had something on her mind. She had been wondering why he chose her as his partner. Ian's response was simple: because they were friends. But Syria wasn't used to having friends, and didn't know how it worked. She even offered him gold in return, thinking she needed to give him something in exchange. Ian explained that friendship wasn't a business deal. Friends talked, shared things, and supported each other without expecting payment. Realizing this, Syria decided to ask him something bold. She wondered if he was doing all this because of Emma. They had gone deep into the forest, and she suspected he was seeking revenge for what had happened to her. Ian didn't answer right away. Instead, anger surged through him, his body trembling at the memories of his dear friend. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here to find the magical beasts before they could attack. Syria was horrified. Was this also part of what friendship meant? Ian thought it was only natural. He then wondered how she would react if he were the one in danger. Without hesitation, Syria declared that she would fight to protect him. That was exactly how he felt now. Syria, who had always been alone, was slowly beginning to understand what it meant to have a friend. Ian reassured her that he wasn't acting recklessly. He had a plan, and their safety was his priority. Then he heard something. He told Syria to focus. At first, she sensed nothing, but then she felt it. A sinister presence watching them. Nearly a dozen magical beasts lurked in the shadows, their eyes glowing ominously. If they didn't act fast, the other students would be in serious danger. Syria reached for her blade, ready to fight, but Ian advised against it. Taking on this many creatures head-on was a bad idea. Their best chance was to warn the professor. Without wasting time, they ran. The monsters were right behind them, closing the distance fast. Ian was confident they could make it. The professor wasn't too far, and they had a decent lead. But then, the worst happened. Syria stumbled, twisting her ankle. She insisted she could keep going, even offering to stay behind. But Ian wasn't leaving her behind. The creatures were getting closer. They had only moments left. Ian ordered Syria to run, a ridiculous instruction given how much trouble she had already caused him. He needed her to keep the truth from her friends while he stayed behind to deal with the threat. As she fled, Ian dashed forward, prepared to confront the monsters on his own. The silence in the forest confirmed his fears. The nearby animals had already gone into hiding, sensing danger. Taking advantage of the moment, Ian planned his ambush. He uncorked the presence-erasing vial and drank the foul liquid, suppressing his existence from the creature's senses. However, his scent remained a problem. To counter this, he covered himself in soil and grass, blending into the environment. With his scent masked, Ian located a good hiding spot and climbed onto a sturdy tree branch, waiting for the right moment. A wolf-like creature emerged from the shadows, its energy stronger than an adult man's. This was no ordinary beast. It was a true demonic entity. The creature appeared confused, its nose sniffing the air for the scent it had just followed. That was Ian's chance. He lunged from the branch, blade in hand, aiming for the creature's head. His aura, however, was too weak to pierce through completely. Determined, Ian threw his full weight into the attack, forcing the blade deeper. The monster struggled, but he refused to let go until his sword finally broke through the skull. His first kill was complete. But if just one was this difficult, he wondered how many more he could take down alone. There was no time for doubt. He had to protect Syria at all costs. More beasts lurked nearby, searching for him. At least 5 were within range. The only strategy was to kill them before they could alert the rest of the pack. Moving swiftly, Ian struck down multiple wolves, each attack precise and relentless. Amidst the battle, one of them managed to bite into his arm, sharp fangs sinking deep. Pain flared through his body, but he bit down the scream, knowing that making noise would bring more enemies. With sheer force, he drove his axe into the creature, silencing it for good. His body ached, but his movements felt sharper than before. Ever since the spirit possessed him, his speed and reflexes had grown unnaturally strong. He wasn't sure what the spirit wanted, but at least it had made him stronger. Right now, that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, back with the group, Selene fumed over Ian's decision to pair up with Syria instead of her. She even accused them of being more than just partners. Before the argument could escalate, Syria returned, breathless and panicked, explaining everything that had happened. Instructor Derek's expression darkened upon hearing that Ian had stayed behind alone. Without hesitation, he rushed into the forest. Overwhelmed with exhaustion, Syria collapsed, praying that Ian would survive. Back in the forest, Ian lay hidden among the corpses of the fallen beasts. Another monster approached, sniffing at its dead companions. As soon as it lowered its guard, Ian struck fast, slicing its neck in one clean motion. The creature fell instantly, but fatigue was catching up with him. More beasts arrived, and this time he had no traps or tricks left. Blood coated his body, both his own and that of the monsters he had slain. Despite the exhaustion, his golden eyes gleamed with determination. He wasn't backing down. Raising his axe, he welcomed the next fight. The two wolves lunged at him together, faster than any he had faced before. But Ian had learned their patterns. Instead of retreating, he charged forward, unleashing a powerful cross-slash that struck both enemies at once. With precise, ruthless strikes, he finished them off. Another victory. But Ian wasn't done yet. He vowed to kill every last one of these monsters, no matter what it took. Ian's body is worn down, but he knows most of the creatures have been dealt with. Still, he senses one more nearby. Unlike the others, this one isn't rushing toward him. Instead, it lingers, waiting. Ian realizes it might be setting a trap. A clever opponent, but he isn't about to play into its hands. A sharp, unpleasant smell catches his attention. It's familiar. Too familiar. The scent of alchemy, something from his classroom. No, not just any potion. It's from Emma's workshop. His grip tightens on his blade as a realization hits him. This beast isn't just another monster. It's the one responsible for attacking Emma. A piece of her robe is still caught in its fangs. The monster drops the fabric onto Ian's blade as if mocking him. It circles him confidently, fully aware of its strength. Ian understands the situation. This isn't an ordinary beast. It's a high-ranking predator, and one wrong move could end him. He has to be careful. Before he can act, the beast launches itself at him, slamming into his body with incredible force and knocking him backward. Its speed is overwhelming. It charges again, but Ian reacts just in time, shoving his blade into its open mouth. The wolf recoils, but Ian knows that's not enough. Seizing the moment, he swings his axe with full force, but the creature's thick hide deflects the blow, sending the weapon flying out of his hands. The beast recovers quickly, barely scratched. Ian watches as it gracefully lands, its movements almost effortless. Despite the hit, it remains confident, unfazed. However, he notices something. His attack shattered a few of its teeth. That means biting won't be its main weapon anymore, but that doesn't make it any less dangerous. The creature lunges again, swiping with its claws. Ian barely dodges, but he's running out of stamina. His body is slower, weaker. He needs to end this now, but how? Every attack so far has barely done anything. The beast, sensing its advantage, fires a powerful energy blast, slamming Ian against a tree. His vision blurs. The monster moves in for the final blow, claws ready to tear through him. Ian knows he has only one chance. He remembers how the beast treated Emma, not as a threat, but as a toy. It didn't kill her instantly, it played with its prey. That arrogance would be its downfall. As the monster strikes, it looks like Ian has been torn apart, but instead, he anticipated the move and angled his blade perfectly. The moment the beast came close, he drove his weapon straight into its gut, aiming for the weakest spot. The monster's confidence turns to shock. Ian doesn't stop. Fueled by rage, he cuts deeper, ensuring the beast feels every bit of pain it inflicted on Emma. The once proud creature collapses, its body torn open. It made the mistake of underestimating him. Now, it pays the price. With one final strike, Ian ends it, dedicating the kill to Emma. The battle is over, but his anger lingers. He hopes the monster felt even a fraction of the suffering it caused before it took its last breath. Instructor Derek moves swiftly through the dense forest, his focus locked on finding Ian. He hopes the young warrior is still in one piece. When he finally arrives at the scene, he is met with a gruesome sight. Lifeless bodies of magical beasts scattered across the ground. The air is thick with the scent of battle, and Ian's presence lingers nearby. The rest of the students, including Celine, soon catch up, their eyes scanning the area for any sign of him. Despite the carnage left behind, Ian is nowhere to be seen, adding to their growing concern. Derek, relying on his instincts, leads them further down the path. Eventually they find him, sitting against the corpse of a massive wolf, struggling to catch his breath. His exhaustion is evident, and before anyone can say a word, his strength gives out and he collapses. barely managing to call out for his instructor. The next thing Ian remembers is waking up inside a temple. A saintess watches over him, explaining that Derek had carried him back after his brutal fight. His wounds are healing, but full recovery will take some time. Though he succeeded in avenging Emma, the victory feels hollow. She still remains in a coma. Worse yet, the beast he fought was still young. A fully matured one would have never given him a chance. His peace is quickly interrupted by a friend, who wastes no time calling him reckless. Ian, still groggy, has no patience for lectures, but the argument continues. His friend points out a better strategy. If Ian had given the potion to Syria and hidden her instead, he could have rushed to Derek sooner, preventing unnecessary risks. Realizing the logic behind it, Ian can only groan, knowing he completely overlooked that option. Meanwhile, Syria lingers outside the temple, too nervous to enter. The sight of her waiting so anxiously only raises more questions for Ian. Before he can process it, Celine bursts into the room, throwing herself at him in a tight embrace. Her relief is evident, though it quickly turns into frustration. She scolds him for his recklessness, even biting his fingers in her usual dramatic fashion. Despite his injuries, Ian learns he's earned a reward, 70 gold, for taking down the magical beasts. However, Celine wastes no time suggesting they celebrate with a feast at a high-end restaurant specializing in rare magical beast dishes. Ian, barely able to move, finds the request ridiculous, but she insists, acting like he owes her for all the stress she endured. The playful banter doesn't last long, as emotions take over. Celine's voice softens, her embrace tightening as she admits how terrified she was of losing him. Ian, though surprised, reassures her with a gentle pat on the head. He might be reckless, but he isn't one to fall so easily. Still, Celine can't stand how he constantly throws himself into danger without hesitation. To her, he matters far more than Syria ever could. Ian, ever oblivious, doesn't fully grasp the depth of her words. To him, they've always been childhood friends, nothing more. Yet, from an outsider's view, this moment, this tension, could have easily shifted into something entirely different. Celine, overwhelmed with emotion, begs Ian to take better care of himself. She grips his hand tightly and leans in close, her face inches from his. Just as the moment intensifies, their friend suddenly appears, interrupting them. Celine jumps back in shock, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Meanwhile, Ian is left feeling guilty. He has always seen Celine as a little sister, nothing more. Their friend, however, sees things differently. He points out that if Ian is serious about strengthening his bond with Syria, he should also consider how his actions affect Celine. Lately, Ian has been attracting a lot of attention, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. In fact, his presence alone has created a rift between Celine and Syria. From Syria's perspective, everything feels different now. Because of her mistake, someone else had to step in. Ian fought on her behalf and reminded her of what true friendship meant. When Derek carried him to the temple, she feared for his life, realizing that her actions had nearly cost him everything. In the past, she wouldn't have understood why someone would take such a risk for her. While reflecting, she finds her thoughts constantly interrupted by Ian's presence. He is the only one who has treated her kindly despite the trouble she brings. He never scolded her, never blamed her. Around him she feels safe, free to be herself. That's why she doesn't want to lose him. Now, she understands, even if only a little, what he must have felt while fighting to protect her. Determined, Sia decides to visit Ian at the temple. Shy and hesitant, she asks how he's feeling. He reassures her that he is recovering well, which instantly lifts her spirits. Ian is relieved to have company. He's been stuck reading a dull book Leto gave him to prepare for an upcoming exam. Seeing her guilt, he reminds her that there's no reason for him to be upset with her. She brightens at his words, a reaction that catches him off guard. Syria then hands him a small bag, explaining that it contains the reward money for defeating the magical beasts. Ian opens it, shocked to see so many gold coins. He immediately realizes that Syria must have added extra from her own pocket. Refusing to accept it, He insists that a person's life can't be repaid with gold. As she shyly reaches out, their hands briefly touch. Before the moment can settle, Selene suddenly appears. The mood shifts instantly. She glares at Syria before pushing past her, demanding an update on Ian's condition. Ian is taken aback by Selene's hostility, while Syria silently gets up, realizing it's best to leave. Selene, not holding back, coldly remarks that Syria is the reason Ian ended up in the temple in the first place. Ian snaps at her for being rude, but Selene brushes him off. Instead, she starts talking about where they should eat after his discharge. At that moment, Ian remembers Leto's warning. He tries to reason with Selene, but she doesn't seem to care. All that matters to her is spending time with him. Meanwhile, Syria leaves the temple feeling dejected. Her slumped posture doesn't go unnoticed by the other students. Many of them dislike her, seeing her as nothing more than an arrogant top student. Now, with rumors of her abandoning Ian spreading, some believe it's the perfect chance to bring her down. A few students consider taking action against her, but one of their seniors, Teen, warns them to be careful. Going against the Yordina family could have serious consequences. However, their conversation is interrupted by a mysterious woman who seems to know something about Syria's past. Removing her cloak, she reveals a shocking truth. Syria's birth is far more complicated than anyone realizes, and if what she says is true, there may be no reason to fear the Yordina family at all. Elsewhere, Ian visits Emma, who remains unconscious. He blames himself for ignoring the warnings from the letter. 2 predictions have already come true, which means the next danger, the magical beasts at the upcoming hunting festival, is almost certain to happen. The letter specifically mentioned the word monster, suggesting that the threat they face will be even greater than before. Frustrated, Ian knows he won't be able to handle this on his own. His only option is to seek help from his instructor. While deep in thought, he is interrupted by the Saintess, who is surprised to find him at Emma's bedside. He asks about Emma's condition and learns that, while she is still alive, there is no guarantee she will ever wake up. Ian recalls a past conversation with the Saintess. She once mentioned that Emma could be saved if a rare and valuable offering was made. He needs to know what she meant. She explains that an object with strong divine energy is required, typically the remains of a magical beast. However, such items are incredibly hard to obtain, even for her father. Ian wonders if the remains of a high-ranking magical beast would be enough, but she quickly clarifies that even that won't work. Only an adult specimen of a powerful species might be sufficient. This gives Ian some hope. The Saintess reassures him that Emma is on the verge of a miraculous recovery, so perhaps she will heal on her own. Leaving the conversation, Ian contemplates whether the monster he will encounter at the hunting festival might be strong enough to serve as an offering, but that possibility brings another issue. He barely survived his last fight. He knows he won't stand a chance unless his professor steps in. Determined, Ian heads straight for the faculty hall, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. He pushes open a door without hesitation, excusing his sudden entrance. Professor Derek welcomes him, relieved to see Ian in good health. Without wasting time, Ian brings up the concern of even stronger magical beasts appearing. He wants to know if the professor would step in if things spiral out of control. Professor Derek, however, remains unconcerned. He believes no creatures stronger than the wolves will show up again. Ian feels frustrated. This has already happened twice. What's stopping it from happening again? The professor explains that magical beasts emerge in places rich in unrefined magic. That's why the Empire closely monitors areas where humans live, preventing the creatures from spawning. The only exception is the southern forest, where the hunting festival takes place. The Empire maintains a controlled balance, keeping the beast population in check while ensuring that no excessively powerful ones appear. Ian argues that a particularly strong creature could still survive, but the professor dismisses the idea. Powerful beasts thrive on battle, and their presence would have been noticed by now. If one has somehow gone undetected, it must possess a unique ability. Regardless, the hunting festival exists to challenge students, and one strong beast shouldn't be a cause for concern. Ian realizes the professor won't interfere no matter what happens. His only option is to prepare for the worst on his own. Meanwhile, Saria Yordina enters the cafeteria, her graceful presence standing out. But the students no longer treat her as an untouchable figure. To them, she's a target, someone they can openly insult. The bullying had died down for a while, but now it's back, harsher than before. This time, they attack the most painful part of her past, her mother. Carrying her lunch, Saria turns to face her tormentors. Their smug expressions show they feel no fear of her. For a moment, she considers a response, but quickly decides it isn't worth it. She has no time to waste on people like them. However, Teen, the leader of the group, takes offense at being ignored. He moves past her on purpose, bumping into her roughly. The impact sends her stumbling forward, her tray slipping from her hands. The sound of her plate shattering fills the cafeteria, followed by an eruption of laughter. For the first time, Saria experiences true humiliation. She had always been looked down upon, but this moment feels different. It cuts deeper. While she suffers through this, Ian enjoys his first real meal after days of hospital food, unaware of the situation. As he walks past some students, he overhears gossip about the Yordina family. His interest peaks when he hears them talking about Syria. The nobles dismiss her status, claiming her mother was of low birth, making her unworthy of her family's name. One of them even remarks that the only person willing to stand up for her is Ian Purkis. That's when they realize the person they're gossiping about is standing right behind them. Ian stares them down in silence, his sharp gaze enough to make them sweat. Without saying much, he demands to know exactly what they were talking about. The lead gossiper stutters, desperately trying to change the subject. His so-called friends have already abandoned him, leaving him alone with Ian. But Ian isn't in the mood to let things slide. He grips the guy's shoulder firmly, making it clear that he expects answers. After gathering the information he needs, Ian heads to his next class, topology. Unfortunately, spatial theory and mapping aren't his strong suits. His friend Leto notices his sour mood and pulls out a parchment, hoping to lift his spirits. It's an article about the Southern Forest magical beast repelling case, something that might be worth looking into. Ian Purkis, a third-year academy student, had gained recognition for his role in a recent battle against multiple magical beasts. Reports detailed his victory over 10 creatures, including one of high rank. The article praised his achievements, calling them extraordinary. However, it also harshly criticized Saria Yordina, the Academy's top swordsmanship student, for supposedly abandoning a friend during the battle. This portrayal frustrated Ian because he knew the truth. Saria had only left to get the professor's help. The unfair coverage left Ian with a headache. Leto pointed out that the story was likely exaggerated to attract attention. The idea of a noble girl fleeing while a lower-ranking student triumphed made for a dramatic and marketable tale. Ian worried that if the truth remained hidden, Saria's reputation would suffer even more. But Leto warned him that the one in charge of the Academy's newspaper, someone from a high-station background, would never listen to someone of Ian's standing. Changing the story was not an option, and the best course of action would be to ignore it and move on. Saria's situation continued to worsen. More students were beginning to target her, emboldened by the rumors spreading throughout the academy. Ian had already confronted a few of the gossipers earlier, scaring them off, but the harassment was escalating. Leto suspected that someone was deliberately fueling the hatred against Saria, using public opinion as a weapon. While Teen, a known delinquent from the violent Southern Kingdom, had always disliked Saria, he didn't have the influence to spread rumors so effectively. Whoever was behind this had access to personal information about Saria's background, suggesting a much larger scheme. Ian decided on a course of action. First, he would deal with Teen and his group. Once they were handled, he would work on uncovering the mastermind. He spent hours searching the campus for Saria, and finally found her by sunset. He approached her smiling, unaware of her miserable state. It wasn't until he got closer that he saw what had happened. Her once pristine appearance was ruined, her hair and clothes were drenched in red liquid, and her eyes were filled with tears. Earlier, Syria had attempted to return to the cafeteria for another meal after her first one had been ruined. On the way, she encountered a group of students openly mocking her. When their usual insults failed to provoke a reaction, they escalated by targeting her mother, a topic that had always been used against her. They even went as far as suggesting she wasn't of noble birth at all. Syria had tried to endure it, hoping the harassment would stop, but it didn't. When she finally reacted, stepping forward to confront them, she fell into a carefully placed trap. Magic had been used to destabilize her footing, making her stumble. The group laughed as she struggled to regain her balance. One of them took out a bottle of wine and poured it over her, drenching her completely. The act was humiliating, and the ringleader treated it as a joke, mocking her misfortune. Syria knew that using magic without incantations was nearly impossible, meaning they had spent the entire day preparing for this moment. Despite her anger, she held back, knowing that any retaliation could worsen her already precarious situation. Ian, on the other hand, was furious. He believed she had every right to fight back, but the bullies had been smart enough to disguise their actions. They issued a fake public apology, calling it an accident, while making sure their insults never directly mentioned Syria's name. If she had reacted violently, she would have been the one punished, while they would have walked away unscathed. The injustice of the situation fueled Ian's determination. Syria, wiping away her tears, thanked him for listening, but no matter how many times she insisted she was fine, Ian refused to let it go. She may have been forced to tolerate it because of her position, but he wouldn't. He had no interest in maintaining the status quo. Meanwhile, Teen and his group gathered at the back of the academy, celebrating their actions. One of them bragged about how Syria had fallen for their trap, while another laughed about the luxurious shower they had given her. Their conversation was cut short by Ian's arrival. He walked straight up to them, demanding to know the source of the rumors about Syria's personal life. They dismissed him, mocking his attempt to defend her. Ian didn't waste time arguing. He let his fists do the talking. One punch sent one of the goons crashing to the ground, silencing their laughter instantly. The fight had begun, and Ian had no intention of holding back. The group stared in disbelief. A low-ranking noble had just struck a proper aristocrat. Before they could react, Ian had already sent another opponent tumbling into an alley with a swift attack. One of the goons attempted a sneak attack from behind, but Ian countered immediately, launching him into the air. Two were down, but there was still more to go. He wasn't even feeling tired yet. He knew these arrogant nobles wouldn't give up any information so easily, so he might as well take his time. He would beat them down until they had no choice but to apologize. Judging by the weapons they carried, it seemed that the only magic user had already been dealt with. That left only Teen, the most troublesome opponent. A top student from the third-year sword department, he would be much harder to defeat, but there was no point in overthinking. Ian was ready to fight anyone who stood in his way. The remaining goons, realizing they had no chance alone, decided to attack together. Instead of waiting, Ian rushed forward, determined to take control of the fight. His sword was swift and powerful, difficult to block. One opponent tried to stand his ground, but was quickly overwhelmed. A strong swing knocked his blade away, nearly taking his head with it. Another enemy fell. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Ian's back. He turned to see two more goons attacking in sync. Forced onto the defensive, he struggled to keep their blades from cutting him down. Gritting his teeth, he waited for the right moment, then struck back, creating enough space to counterattack. His next slash connected cleanly, hitting a goon on the side of the head and dropping him instantly. With one opponent left, Ian charged forward bare-handed, only to reveal a hidden hatchet at the last second. The noble, sensing real danger, froze in place. It was over in seconds. The fight against the lackeys was done. Now, only Teen remained. Teen, drawing his massive greatsword, seemed unfazed. He remarked on Ian's sudden improvement, implying that he had been keeping an eye on his training. It was clear that Teen had been watching him and Syria for a while. Ian's victories over Syria had caught his attention, and now he saw him as a threat. With a flicker of energy, Tien infused his blade with a glowing aura. His speed was on a completely different level. The sheer weight of his attacks forced Ian back several steps. Seeing his advantage, Tien pressed forward, nearly cutting Ian down with an upward slash. Ian knew he was outmatched in magic. He could read Tien's movements, but the sheer power of that enchanted sword was overwhelming. No matter how hard he tried, the gap between them was too wide. Every strike pushed him closer to defeat. Tien's attacks were both quick and devastating, and Ian's defense was beginning to falter. Despite the overwhelming difference in power, Ian refused to back down. He was exhausted, but he wasn't done yet. His opponent may have held the advantage, but he was determined to find a way to win. Tien made it clear that if Ian could truly pull off a victory, he would accept his defeat with honor. The men of the fierce southern kingdom prided themselves on facing the consequences of a fair duel. However, that claim seemed hollow coming from someone who had resorted to harassing Syria just because he couldn't best her in a proper fight. Fueled by excitement, Tien surged forward, his greatsword glowing with dangerous energy as he aimed to end the fight with one decisive strike. Ian concentrated, carefully reading the path of the incoming attack. The swing appeared to be a powerful downward slash, but it was merely a deceptive maneuver. In an instant, the magic-infused greatsword shifted its angle and struck from the side instead. The impact was overwhelming, knocking Ian off his feet and sending him crashing onto the ground. He struggled to catch his breath, the sheer speed of the attack unlike anything he had faced before. As Ian recovered, Tien took the opportunity to bring up something that had been bothering him since Ian's first battle against Syria. He had witnessed a moment where Ian had somehow avoided an attack that should have been inescapable, as if reality itself had bent in his favor. The memory of that strange occurrence resurfaced, back when Ian had been momentarily possessed by the mysterious dark entity. From a logical standpoint, only a highly skilled master should have the ability to manipulate space like that. While processing this thought, Ian's attention shifted to the ground beneath him. It felt unusually soft, riddled with indentations from their earlier battle. That detail sparked an idea. A strategy formed in his mind, giving him his only chance to turn the fight in his favor. Unaware of Ian's realization, Tien intensified his offense, his magic surging like a raging storm. He resembled a berserker cloaked in lightning, each swing of his weapon crackling with raw energy. Ian, despite his clumsy movements, continued to evade, just in time. After managing to slip past the wide range of Tien's attacks, Ian made a bold move. He slid his sword back into its scabbard. Seeing this, Tien assumed the fight was over. From his perspective, Ian had given up, surrendering to his superiority. However, Ian was merely waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Just as expected, Tien took the bait. The overconfident swordsman lunged forward, closing the distance with a few rapid steps. That was when his footing betrayed him. His boots sank slightly into the uneven terrain, disrupting his balance. Ian had already calculated the exact angle he needed. Moving efficiently, he avoided the reckless charge without any wasted motion. Tien's sword cleaved through empty air, leaving him vulnerable. As he turned to react, he found himself face to face with Ian's fierce gaze, one that held no hesitation. A hatchet was already swinging toward him. The impact was brutal. It was the first clean hit Ian had landed in the fight, and it sent a shock through Tien's entire body. His confidence wavered. He tried to recover quickly to regain control, but Ian was already pressing forward. With rapid and relentless speed, Ian drove him back, knocking him to the ground before he could even raise his greatsword. Ian wasted no time. He grabbed hold of the fallen noble's neck, locking him in a merciless chokehold. His grip tightened as he raised the hatchet, the dull side poised for another strike. The promise of silencing this arrogant noble once and for all was about to be fulfilled. Confusion filled Tien's eyes. He had never experienced such raw brutality before. Each hit with the blunt end of the hatchet sent waves of pain through his body, the relentless beating continuing until he finally lost consciousness. Ian's rage burned hotter than ever, his fury aimed at those who dared to target Syria. People like Tien, who acted superior while stabbing others in the back, deserved nothing but punishment. A spoiled noble who relied on status alone needed to be shattered completely. By the time Ian was done, the once proud young master of the Southern Kingdom was left battered and barely conscious, his body limp and unrecognizable from the beating. Just as the dust began to settle, a familiar voice broke the silence. One of the earlier defeated goons had regained consciousness, his arrogance still intact. He loudly announced his identity, declaring himself to be Lupin, the third son of Count Renella of the Empire. His words dripped with self-importance, as if his family name alone meant anything at this moment. Ian didn't bother listening to the meaningless speech. With a quick flick of his wrist, he sent his hatchet flying, the blade embedding itself just inches from Lupin's face. The message was clear. His patience was wearing thin. Despite all that boasting, all Ian had gathered was that another fool was eager to get beaten senseless. However, there was still something useful to be gained. Now that one of them was awake, Ian finally had someone to interrogate properly. He needed to know how serious personal information had been leaked. Realizing that empty words would do nothing to save him, Lupin quickly abandoned his arrogance. Without hesitation, he spilled everything. The information had come from a girl with striking green hair. None of them knew her name or her true intentions, but her appearance had made her easy to remember. That was all Ian needed to hear. There was another piece to this puzzle, and it was time to find out exactly what was going on. Lupin desperately insisted that all the information about Sirius' mother had come from a mysterious green-hailed girl. He had nothing else to offer and swore it was the full extent of his knowledge, hoping to avoid the same brutal fate as the others. Ian didn't fully trust him, but at least he had a lead. Still, he made sure Lupin understood. Next time there would be no warnings. The message was clear. Anyone who tried to harm Syria again would be hunted down without mercy. With the troublemakers dealt with, Syria could finally have some peace. Now, the school's delinquents knew that messing with her came with consequences. If they dared to try again, they would have to face an opponent who wouldn't hesitate to chase them to the ends of the earth. As for the person spreading rumors about Syria's past, Ian silently vowed to find them and put an end to their schemes. The following day, students of the swordsmanship department engaged in practice duels, sharpening their skills in class. While everyone else was focused on sparring, Syria found herself distracted, unable to shake her concern for Ian. She felt that his actions the day before had been driven by anger. That worried her. No matter what, she never wanted him to suffer because of her problem. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted when a group of girls decided to mock her again. They sneered at her, calling her an orphan, and smirked when she glared at them. Instead of backing off, they doubled down, taunting her for not even having a mother to comfort her. Syria had endured their insults in silence for days, not wanting to cause trouble. But patience had its limits. Her grip tightened on her sword, struggling to keep her composure and resist the urge to lash out. Seeing her barely restrained fury, the girls pushed further, claiming her aggression was proof of improper upbringing. They might have continued their cruel remarks if not for an unexpected interruption. A firm, commanding voice ordered them to stop. It came from Tien, his face still covered in bandages from the injuries Ian had given him the previous day. Tien didn't need to say much. His presence alone, along with the sheer force of his words, made the girls recoil. He told them plainly, if they didn't want to end up like him, they had better walk away now. The girls hesitated, trying to make excuses, but Tien wasn't fooled. He had played the same manipulative games before. He cut off their excuses, making it clear that their only option was to leave. As he spoke, Tien's entire group of beaten-up followers arrived, each one bearing signs of their humiliating defeat. The sight was enough to send a wave of unease through the onlookers. Fear settled in as the girls realized that if Ian had no issue thrashing a gang of notorious delinquents, he wouldn't hesitate to deal with them just as ruthlessly. To everyone's surprise, Tien and his group walked up to Syria, then collectively bowed. In front of the entire class, they apologized for their behavior. Tien promised they wouldn't bother her again. Syria was caught off guard. They could have done this in private, yet they chose to make a public display out of it. The act drew even more attention than necessary, making it clear that they wanted the entire academy to know what had happened. Tien, still slightly smirking, explained that this was intentional. If vague rumors spread, people might twist the story and mock them for losing. Instead, they wanted to leave a lasting impression that Ian was not just strong, but utterly ruthless. It was better to be feared than ridiculed. Despite his newfound respect for Ian's strength, Tien still didn't like Syria. He found her personality grating, but even if he couldn't stand her, he recognized that having strong allies was a skill in itself. Before leaving, he urged Syria to tell Ian about their apology, hoping it would finally get Ian off his back. Syria had always thought of Tien as nothing more than a violent brute, but now she saw he was more cunning than she had assumed. Once the third-year delinquents left, the two girls who had been harassing her quickly followed suit. They bowed awkwardly, mumbling apologies and swearing never to mock her again. For the first time, Syria truly realized what a difference it made to have someone stand by her side. If she had been alone, she would have endured the cruelty in silence, believing she had no choice. But Ian had changed that. Still, she couldn't rely on him forever. She needed to learn how to stand up for herself. From now on, she would handle things on her own. While the academy remained lively with ongoing classes, Ian spent his time in the infirmary. The Saintess was far from pleased with his growing habit of ending up there. More importantly, she had heard the rumors. He had beaten 8 people in a single day. She was running out of patience. She had helped him before, but even she had limits. If it weren't for the reasoning he gave her, the Rinella family would have turned this into a major issue. Ian barely paid attention to her frustration. He was more focused on one thing: who were the Rinellas? When he asked, the Saintess sighed and explained that they were a noble family and Lupin was their third son. Hearing this, Ian made a mental note to be cautious. While Lupin had acted submissive for now, revenge wasn't out of the question. He would have to stay on guard. Thinking back on the events of the previous day, Ian realized he had acted recklessly. He hadn't considered the bigger consequences, like how noble families could retaliate. Fortunately, the Saintess had decided to take his side. She firmly believed that justice was on his side, and she had her own reasons for supporting him. When she mentioned owing him a favor, Ian was momentarily confused. That was another mystery he needed to figure out later. Leto laid out the situation clearly. Ian asked if Celine had any idea who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. The only thing they could do was narrow down the suspects. It couldn't be a second-year student. They were just a group of bullies with no real leader. Tien's third-year gang had been leading the harassment, but they weren't the real masterminds either. That left the first and fourth years. The first years had little to no connection with Saria, making them unlikely suspects. That meant the true culprit was probably a fourth-year student. With Leto's wide network of noble connections, tracking them down wouldn't take long. They needed to find this high-ranking noble and put an end to their scheming. Lupin's name had come up, which helped narrow the search even further. Now, all that was left was to catch and deal with the mastermind. Meanwhile, Ian had finally recovered from his injuries. As he left the infirmary, he felt a strange emptiness. There was no one waiting for him. On his way out, he crossed paths with Emma's father, who was on his way to visit his daughter. The man gave Ian a respectful bow, making him feel awkward. Emma's condition was critical. The doctors said she was barely hanging on. Her father had heard about Ian slaying the magical beast that attacked her, and had come to express his gratitude before leaving. The man's sincerity struck a chord in Ian, reigniting his determination to find a way to save Emma. While Leto continued gathering information, Ian wandered into a secluded field surrounded by trees. In the middle of it stood Saria, training hard. The moment Ian saw her, he noticed something different about her presence. Remembering how skilled she was in battle, he was impressed by the aura she gave off. She had been practicing long before he arrived, her body drenched in sweat. When asked about her progress, she admitted her training hadn't been going well without his guidance. Realizing how vulnerable that sounded, she quickly tried to brush it off. Ian, sensing her embarrassment, changed the subject and asked about the technique she had been practicing. Excitedly, Saria explained that it was the Golden Lion Sword, a secret technique from her family. It created multiple overlapping sword traces, making it difficult for an opponent to distinguish between real and fake attacks. Right now, she could only create 3, but true masters could generate more than 10 at once. Given how powerful the technique was, Ian wondered if it was okay for her to show it so openly. She confidently claimed that even with his skills, there was no way he could copy it. Realizing that might have sounded like an insult, she awkwardly tried to rephrase her words. Ian didn't take offense. He knew she wasn't great at social interactions, at least she was starting to understand people's emotions better than before. Saria then brought up what Ian had done for her the previous day, thanking him sincerely. Ian took her hands and reassured her that they would always support each other when needed. That's what friends were for. His words made her heart race, though he was completely oblivious to the effect he had on her. Her face turned red, and she struggled to keep her composure. Feeling a surge of motivation, Saria became even more determined to face her struggles on her own. Ian, sensing the tension, quickly shifted focus to training. As he observed her improvements, he was pleasantly surprised. Her aura had become much more stable, but more importantly, its color had changed. This was no small development. Even if the shift was subtle, it was significant. Her aura had previously been a pale shade of blue, but now it was deeper and more refined. Aura color reflected a person's subconscious state, meaning this transformation signified a change deep within her. Saria found it odd. She hadn't felt any change within herself, yet her aura had shifted. Ian suggested it might be linked to the recent exposure of her mother's past, but she knew that wasn't the reason. The pain of those memories had been with her for a long time. It wasn't something that just now started affecting her. It all began when she was 6 years old, the day her mother was cast out of the Yerdina family. Saria still remembered her mother's desperate pleas, begging to stay with her child, but her father was merciless. With a simple command, he ordered his knights to remove the disgraceful woman from his presence. Saria could only watch in horror as the knights beat her mother, leaving her bruised and broken. Even then, her mother still reached out for her daughter, refusing to let go. Saria, terrified of facing the same fate, stayed silent. She averted her eyes, pretending not to see. In the end, her mother was dragged away. That day, her older sister left her with a chilling warning. If she wasn't useful to the family, she would suffer the same fate. From that moment on, Saria dedicated herself to swordsmanship. At first, it was about proving her worth, showing that she was strong enough to stand beside her family. She wanted to surpass her sister, defeat the heir, and earn her place. But now, it wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving to herself that she wasn't weak. The only true enemy was herself. With Ian supporting her, she felt she had everything she needed to move forward. Hearing her story, Ian felt closer to Saria than ever, for now their focus was on the upcoming hunting festival. Facing Delphine, the Academy's strongest student, in a direct fight would be nearly impossible. But the festival wasn't a one-on-one battle, it was a team event. That gave them a real shot at victory. Meanwhile, in the fourth-year offices, a green-haired girl reported Saria's plans to participate in the festival. She spoke to the future head of the Yerdina family, the very person behind the recent scandal. With a cold smirk, she decided it was time to crush her little sister for good. After morning training, Saria and Ian stepped out of the forest, greeted by the warm sunlight. She decided it was time to resume their investigation into the mysterious letters. But before Ian could leave, Saria hesitated, lightly gripping his sleeve. With a shy expression, she invited him to have breakfast together. Her soft gaze made it impossible to refuse. Ian accepted, ready to enjoy a quiet meal. That moment, however, was quickly ruined by Celine. She arrived right on time, just as morning practice ended. The cheerful smile on her face faded the moment she saw Saria. While Saria attempted a polite greeting, Celine completely ignored her. Instead, she wrapped herself around Ian, hijacking their breakfast plans without a second thought. Ian, as clueless as ever, let himself get pulled away. But this time, Saria wasn't backing down. Suddenly, Ian found himself caught between two women locked in a silent battle. Their argument quickly gathered attention, with Celine acting far too familiar and possessive. She kept referring to Ian as her man, as if claiming ownership. Saria wasn't having it. She demanded that Celine let go of Ian, but Celine only smirked, taunting her. She dismissed Saria, claiming Ian was only giving her attention out of pity. Ian's expression darkened at those words, but before he could say anything, Saria responded with quiet confidence. She had always sensed Celine's hostility, the way she spoke behind her back, but now, face to face, she saw the truth. Celine wasn't just being petty. This was her insecurity speaking. Saria wasn't one to lose in a battle of words. She saw right through Celine, hitting her where it hurt, and with one final statement, she left Celine completely shaken. If Ian's kindness was out of pity, then she would gladly remain pitiful, if it meant staying by his side forever. Celine's hand instinctively moved toward her sword, but before she could act, Saria's sharp gaze locked onto her. If she dared to draw her blade, Saria wouldn't hold back. The tension crackled in the air. Before things could escalate further, Ian stepped between them, cutting the fight short. It was clear neither of them was backing down, and he needed space from both. By the end of it all, everyone lost. With both girls out of the picture for now, Ian found himself with no company except Leto. Over lunch, he recounted the chaotic morning, oblivious to the real reason for the tension. Leto, on the other hand, couldn't help but laugh. Two stunning girls fighting over his clueless friend? Now that was a sight to imagine. Leto, after some light-hearted teasing, offered his thoughts. He figured that Celine was struggling with her emotions now that she had competition for Ian's attention, but no matter how simply Leto tried to explain it, Ian still couldn't grasp the situation. Not wanting to dwell on it, Ian shifted the conversation, asking about any updates on their investigation. Leto assured him that there would be results soon. He had enlisted the help of both his ex-girlfriends and current girlfriends to track down the green-hailed girl. Apparently, Leto had quite the network. With that settled, Ian turned the topic to something even stranger: the mysterious letters. When he asked Leto if he believed letters could come from the future, Leto looked at him like he had completely lost his mind. Rather than argue, Ian decided to show him proof. He held up some of the pages, but Leto's expression didn't change. Instead, he simply stared, confused. Ian was waving the letters right in front of him, yet Leto saw nothing. Even when he reached out to touch them, his hands passed through thin air. From Leto's perspective, there was nothing there at all. This discovery made Ian look at the letters differently. If Leto couldn't see them, did that mean they only existed for him? Leto, on the other hand, was now concerned that Ian might be under some kind of curse or experiencing a mental breakdown. Ian explained in detail how the letters had accurately predicted Emma's accident and the magical wolf beast's subjugation. Most importantly, they warned of a dangerous magical beast appearing at the upcoming hunting festival, one far beyond what the students could handle. Leto wasn't convinced at first, reasoning that the festival naturally included strong creatures, especially since fourth-year students were participating. However, if the letter was correct, this was something completely outside normal expectations. Yet no matter how hard Ian tried to explain, it was as if his words simply didn't reach Leto. It was possible that the letter's contents couldn't be shared with others. Realizing this, Leto entertained the idea of time distortion affecting only Ian. If that were true, then preventing whatever disaster the letter spoke of was entirely up to him. The manipulation of space and time required the highest level of magic, and even then, it had severe limitations. Emma had mentioned something similar before. This was no ordinary phenomenon. later explained that manipulating space-time would disrupt the natural order, which is why such magic has strict limitations. He pointed out a flaw in the idea. If the letter truly came from the future, then did Ian only defeat the magical wolf because he read the letter? That couldn't be the case, since the letter wouldn't exist unless the wolf was already defeated. This created a paradox where the past and future became intertwined in a way that could throw everything into chaos. In other words, knowing the future meant taking a serious risk. Even the smallest wrong move could have disastrous consequences. Ian was struck by the heavy realization that simply having this knowledge put the entire world in danger. His friend urged him to be careful, suspecting that whoever sent the letter had the same concerns. Ian's actions were now limited. So long as he didn't do anything extreme, events should continue as expected. But one undeniable truth remained. If he made a mistake, it could mean total catastrophe. For an ordinary person like him, carrying such a burden felt overwhelming. Uncertainty clouded his mind, leaving him unsure of what he should do next. Before he could process his thoughts, he was approached by an angry girl, clearly upset about how he had beaten up her brother. She put on a tough front, but given her small stature, the intimidation factor was lacking. However, she didn't come alone. Her entire group was there, ready to gang up on him. It didn't take long for Ian to realize he was dealing with Elsie of the Rinella family, a powerful figure in the Academy's faction wars. The situation was becoming a headache. He had tried to use the Saintess to settle things before, but that only made matters worse. At this point, he figured it was better to just accept the inevitable beating and get it over with. Before anything could happen, an argument broke out between Elsie and her brother. Their fight was cut short when one of their men suddenly collapsed, knocked out cold. The attack came from an unexpected source, a flying textbook. The culprit revealed herself with confident strides. She was a blonde woman carrying an air of arrogance. This was none other than Delphine Yordina, Saria's older sister. She wasted no time provoking Elsie, and soon the two were locked in a heated exchange. For Ian, this was a stroke of luck. With the two women too busy arguing, he saw his chance to slip away unnoticed. However, just as he turned to leave, someone caught him in the act, accusing him of trying to run. Ian tries to justify his actions, but his focus shifts when he hears Elsie make an absurd claim. She suggests that Delphine is only protecting him because she has feelings for him. She speculates about what Delphine's true intentions might be, especially considering what Ian did to Saria. Her words push Ian over the edge. His usual calm demeanor vanishes as he reacts instantly, taking down one of her men without hesitation. The mention of Saria in such a way fuels his anger, making him even more ruthless. Elsie, sensing the shift in the situation, signals her subordinates to attack. The first attacker lunges, but Ian easily strikes him down. The second comes at him with a sword, but Ian dodges every swing with precision. Without missing a beat, he counters with a powerful strike, sending his opponent to the ground. He stands over the fallen enemy, his weapon raised, ready to end the fight without hesitation. In mere moments, the battlefield is littered with unconscious opponents. But before Ian can catch his breath, a sudden surge of energy warns him of an incoming attack. He swiftly dodges, just in time to avoid a blast of lightning, Elsie's doing. This was exactly the outcome he wanted. A one-on-one fight with her was long overdue. Elsie remains confident, taunting him for thinking he could ever defeat her. But Ian doesn't waste time with words. Instead, he dashes forward at full speed, closing the distance in an instant. He swings his axe, aiming to overpower her in a single strike. Elsie manages to block the attack with her shield, but the sheer force of the blow drains her energy. Her defense holds, proving her skill. To her, Ian is nothing more than a minor obstacle, someone unworthy of being a real threat. But Ian sees this as an opportunity to push her barrier to its limits. Elsie takes pride in her enforced barrier, certain that no one can break through it. She declares his efforts pointless, confident that he stands no chance. But just as she finishes speaking, Ian moves again, his blade striking her shield with full force. Elsie struggles to maintain her balance after Ian's attack, but before she can recover, he seizes the moment, breaking through her barrier and pinning her down. With his axe raised, he prepares to strike. She quickly recasts her shield, confident it will hold against anything he throws at her. Ian, however, isn't convinced. He's curious to see if she can keep that same confidence when her defense crumbles. Elsie remains arrogant, believing her barrier is unbreakable, mocking the idea that brute force alone could shatter it. While she's focused on defending, she also begins preparing an offensive spell to counterattack. But Ian doesn't let up. Putting all his strength into one final swing, he smashes through the shield completely. The students watching are stunned. No one expected him to actually break through. Meanwhile, Elsie, who had been so cocky just moments ago, suddenly panics, shifting from proud to helpless in an instant. She cries out, begging for help. Seeing her reduced to this state, Ian finds it ironic. After all, she was the one who mocked him and Saria without hesitation. Now, faced with defeat, she pleads for mercy. Ian raises his axe again, making it clear that she made a grave mistake by coming after them, but instead of finishing her, he swings just an inch away from striking her. It's a warning, his way of letting her know that if he ever decides to end her, he won't hesitate next time. With that, he steps back and walks away. Before he gets far, Delphine stops him, interested in having a private conversation. Later that day, Ian's friend wastes no time teasing him, calling him an axe-wielding murderer. The constant ridicule makes Ian consider living up to the name just to shut him up. On top of that, he has a meeting with Delphine later that night, but he has no idea what she wants from him. For now, he shifts his focus to something more pressing, finding any leads on Saria's harassment case. Luckily, his friend has something useful and hands him a note. Ian reads it carefully, remaining unusually calm, which catches his friend off guard. The note contains multiple clues, but to Ian, there's only one key reason behind the harassment. His friend realizes that Ian has already pieced things together. His next step is clear. He needs to meet the person responsible and decide his course of action based on their response. Meanwhile, in another part of the academy, Saria learns that Ian had gotten into trouble while defending her. She realizes that the reason Elsie targeted him was because he constantly stood up for her. It dawns on her just how loyal he is. She had believed herself to be independent, yet Ian had always been there, supporting her more than she could ever repay. Lost in thought, she's startled when Ian suddenly appears. Overwhelmed with emotion, she bursts into tears, apologizing for everything he had to endure because of her. But Ian brushes it off, assuring her that it's nothing to worry about. Whatever anger he once felt is already gone. Saria feels a deep sense of guilt, knowing that Ian has been fighting all of her battles for her. She did nothing, while he went as far as standing against Elsie on her behalf. But Ian simply looks at her with a reassuring smile, making it clear that it's okay to rely on each other. That's what friends do. Hearing this, Saria suddenly makes an unexpected request. Without warning, she wraps her arms around him in a tight embrace. Ian is completely caught off guard, unsure of how to react. The moment lingers longer than he expects before Saria quickly pulls away, flustered and scrambling for an excuse. She apologizes once again for all the trouble she has caused him. Her attention shifts to a nearby sepia flower, an unusual sight since it typically grows in the north rather than the south. Ian recalls that his main reason for approaching Saria was because of Sepia's identity. Seeing this as an opportunity, he casually asks if it's her favorite flower. Saria's face lights up as she confirms that she adores it, just like her mother did. This detail makes Ian question whether Sepia is a name Saria takes on in the future. If so, why would she rename herself? The flower is a crucial clue, and then there's the fact that he was specifically told to get close to Sepia during the upcoming hunting festival. There are too many unanswered questions, but the most pressing one on his mind is whether Saria is the one meant to be married in the future. He quickly dismisses the thought. To him, Saria is just a junior, no matter what fate may hold. Right now, his focus is on his goals. Instead, he shifts the conversation to a different matter, asking whether Delphine is guaranteed to become the successor of the Iodina family. He's curious if Syria has any chance of taking the position. Unfortunately, Syria admits that she is nowhere near qualified to be the successor. Delphine holds all the power and support within the family. Ian wonders if Delphine has mistreated her and considers the possibility of the two sisters eventually clashing for control. But Syria has never been the type to oppose her sister. In fact, she has always obeyed Delphine without question. Delphine once made it clear that if Syria ever became a burden to the family, she would be considered worthless. Because of that, Syria always did what was expected of her, at least until she decided to join the hunting festival. She finds Ian's questions strange and asks what he's getting at. Ian dismisses it, only remarking that she may have to face Delphine someday. That night, Ian arrives at Aedalis Hall, the dormitory for high-ranking nobles. He has a meeting with Delphine, and he knows it's bound to stir up some rumors. When Delphine is informed of his arrival, Ian sees this as his best opportunity to get the information he needs. However, the moment he steps into her quarters, he is left speechless. Delphine is dressed in a way that is far too bold for a simple meeting. Even Ian, who rarely reacts to such things, finds himself taken aback. She smirks at his expression, teasing him before inviting him to take a seat. Ian advises her not to wear such eye-catching outfits, especially around men, but Delphine simply dismisses his concern. She believes that beauty is meant to be admired, and a woman's body is no exception. At the same time, she acknowledges that men's desires can be dangerous, which is why most women choose to cover up. But she considers herself different, untouchable, beyond anyone's reach. Ian silently agrees. In the academy, there is truly no one who poses a threat to Delphine. He grew up in the countryside and isn't used to the flashy ways of nobles like her. She tells him he should start getting used to it, though it almost feels as if she is the one seducing him instead. Getting to the real reason for their meeting, Delphine elegantly extends an offer. She wants him to become her ally. She has never met a young man like him before and promises that she can give him the best opportunities if he agrees. Ian remains skeptical, suspecting that there's more to this proposal than she's letting on. To uncover her true intentions, he decides to bring up the issue of Syria's harassment. Delphine acknowledges the information but dismisses those involved as reckless for challenging the Iodina family. Ian, however, reveals that he has identified a student who frequently visits the dorm and hints at a deeper truth. Delphine, unimpressed by his vague words, presses for clarity. Without hesitation, Ian lays everything out. He explains that the one behind Syria's harassment belongs to the Iodina family, using their influence to spread private information only a select few should know. With the pieces falling into place, Ian makes a bold claim. Delphine is the mastermind. Rather than being shaken, Delphine seems amused by his accusation and questions why she would target her own sister. Ian counters that she fears Syria's growing strength, especially after she openly challenged her at the hunting festival. Still maintaining her composed act, Delphine denies everything, claiming he has no proof. But before Ian can present any evidence, she unexpectedly drops the pretense and admits to it all. She never saw Syria as a threat until she dared to stand against her, so she made sure her younger sister learned her place. Ian argues that Syria only wants to prove herself, but Delphine loses interest in the topic and shifts the conversation. She admits she underestimated Ian's sharpness and makes him an offer. However, Ian makes it clear he has no intention of working with someone like her, shattering a wine glass in defiance. Unbothered by his aggression, Delphine swiftly draws a hidden blade to his throat, proving that she too can play this game. Ian, taken aback by her speed, realizes just how dangerous she truly is. Rather than being angered, Delphine grows more intrigued. She sees potential in Ian, believing she could mold him into a valuable weapon. While some men struggle for attention, Ian finds himself drowning in unwanted interest. He is certain she will regret underestimating him, but Delphine remains confident. She only regrets failure, and she has yet to lose. She ends the discussion, expecting him to leave, but Ian isn't done yet. In an impulsive move, he hurls his axe at her, unwilling to back down. Delphine, despite being caught off guard, narrowly avoids the attack with only a minor scratch. This moment of surprise fades quickly, and she counters, forcing Ian onto the defensive. Just when it seems like she has the upper hand, Ian pulls a last-second maneuver. Switching to his sword after losing his axe, he turns the situation in his favor. Now, they both have their weapons at each other's throats, forcing Delphine to acknowledge his skill. While she remains undefeated, Ian takes pride in the fact that he pushed her this far. Frustrated but impressed, Delphine recognizes this as a consequence of her own ambition. Deciding to change the dynamic, she takes a bold approach, discarding her robe to throw him off. Ian, caught completely off guard, struggles to maintain his composure. Meanwhile, Delphine's maid, concerned by the noise, bursts into the room, misunderstanding the situation entirely. Embarrassed, Delphine hastily reassures her, but the damage is done. Her usual confidence wavers, revealing a rare moment of flustered vulnerability. Ian, unable to handle the chaos, quickly grabs his axe and makes a swift exit. The encounter leaves Delphine at a loss for words, an outcome she never anticipated. The next day, rumors of their meeting spread like wildfire across the academy. Whispers circulate that Ian threatened Delphine with his axe, reinforcing his already infamous reputation. Some label him a dangerous, unpredictable figure. However, as Ian listens in on these rumors firsthand, the sheer absurdity of them makes him realize someone is deliberately spreading misinformation about him. Meanwhile, preparations for the hunting festival move forward. With the event scheduled to take place in 2 weeks, Ian begins assembling his team. As of now, it's just him and Syria, meaning he still needs 2 more members. Recognizing the importance of having a skilled mage, he sets out to recruit one. His first choice is Leto, but the response is a blunt rejection. Unfazed, Ian persists, trying different tactics to convince him. Though Leto refuses to join, he does acknowledge that Ian is making a smart move by seeking a mage. As a compromise, he agrees to help Ian find someone suitable, on the condition that Ian follows his instructions precisely. With that, Ian prepares for what comes next, unaware of just how unpredictable things are about to get.